All right, welcome. I'm very excited that you're all here today. This is the Living Letters Teaching and Coaching Perspectives. We are part of the Office of Early Learning, and we are excited to have you all join us today. My name is Dr. Angela Preston. I'm the Early Literacy Consultant for the Southwest region, and I am thrilled to have you all here, and we are going to just jump right into our panel and hear from some great voices today. But with me today are my fellow moderators, Mary Durfel. She's from the Piedmont Triad. She's the early literacy consultant and will be helping me with the panel and questions today. Along with Mary is Kathy Oliver. She is a Sandhills consultant for the early literacy, and we also have behind the scenes Kelly Pratt. She is the going to be working all behind the scenes, doing the PowerPoints and keeping us all on track with our questions and making sure we get through the panel today. And Kelly joins us from the Western region. So during the panel, you will get a chance to hear from 11 teachers and coaches across the state of North Carolina who are participating and living out letters. We wanted to offer some time for teachers and coaches who are actually living the letters experience and going through it day in and day out with their colleagues to give their perspectives and kind of just talk about letters for the teachers who will be joining shortly this coming fall. So they will respond to the questions about letters content, application, and also the coaching support that is being provided through their districts. Before we begin, we are going to share a few things I'd like you to know. There will be a link to the questions and answers that the panelists are providing, and that will come at the very end. So don't worry, you'll get something at the end. But we, out of respect to our panelists, the chat will be disabled, and we will just have the Q&A to share out the links. We won't be taking a Q&A today. Our presentation is being recorded, so you should see a little record button on your WebEx. And that means that as as joining in with us, one of our attendees, your video and your audio are not going to work because it's being recorded for our panelists. And once we have the video ready to go, we'll put this on the OEL website, and it will also be available through email. So go ahead and click one more, Kelly. To access the handouts and the video, we've created this post-webinar flyer. This will be shared at the very end of our session today. And if you look, you can see the red dot. That one will be live. You'll be able to access the handouts as soon as we're done today. And then you can check back right here and I'll update the video on that link. And then that will be a live link that you'll be able to access. So if you bookmark the handout that's coming, then you'll be able to access it once it's over and the video is updated. And we'll have both of those done by Friday, the March 4th. By next Friday, you'll have an email with the links, and then you'll also be able to get a certificate for attending today. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Mary, and she is going to introduce all of our lovely panelists today.
Thank you, Angela. Yeah, I just echo all of Angela's sentiments. We are so excited for you to get an opportunity to hear from our panelists. So I'm going to introduce each panelist by district, and as I introduce them, they'll turn on their cameras. So first we're going to start with Columbus County. We have two teachers joining us from Columbus County. Tyler Goodwin is a third grade teacher, and Antoinette Hewitt is a kindergarten teacher. Also joining us from Columbus County, we have two instructional coaches, Rebecca Ham and Casey Neely. Now I'm going to introduce our panelists from Davie County. So we have two teachers from Davie County, Megan Cooper, she's a first grade teacher, and Leanne Davis, a fourth grade teacher. And we have an instructional coach from Davie County as well, Renee Hennings Gonzalez. So we're so excited to have those three participants from Davie County. And last but not least, we have Union County. So from Union County, we have two teachers as well. Rhonda Lee is a kindergarten teacher in Union, and Megan Long, a second grade teacher in Union. We also have two instructional support specialists from Union. We have Lindsay Fowler and Amy Wedden. So those are our panelists for today.
Okay, so we are going to jump right into the questions and welcome our panelists here today joining us. We're really going to give everyone a chance to respond to some questions and just kind of take a couple minutes to, provide your response around your letters experience and how things are going. So we're going to kick it off today and just really would love to know before you began your letters professional learning, what were your initial concerns and how did it turn out? And I'm going to kick off our session today with our teacher, Megan Cooper, and then I will turn it over to Leanne. Go ahead, Megan.
So my initial concerns with the letters training was more about adding something extra to my plate in such a difficult year and all the challenges we all face with everything that has happened over the last couple years. Um, I also worried about where I would fit in the time to do this college level coursework that required so much of us. However, it has turned out a lot better than I expected. Um, I chose to set aside 2 days a week and do 30 to 45 minutes after school to work through my sessions. It has helped tremendously. I've been able to stay on um, the pacing with our guide that our departments provided for us, as well as get a little bit ahead. And then we also have been able to schedule one on one time with our instructional coaches to kind of talk or go through or discuss any components that we may need help with.
Thank you, Megan. How about you, Leanne?
Like Megan said, by far my biggest concern was finding the time in an already packed schedule to add something that is pretty in depth. And it is, as I've gotten into it, it is in depth and it is time consuming, but I have found it to be very useful information. And I've said to my colleagues a couple of times, I wish I had this information as a beginning teacher. Um, and I wish that it were a requirement for beginning teachers as a college level class. Um, I have found that for me, using the pacing guide that our county has set aside has been very helpful. And doing the book work first, then the videos um, has been helpful. And doing both of those things in the same day. While the reading is fresh on my mind, I like having the videos to reiterate what I have just read. And I think that helps me to retain the information. But it's been good information. But like Megan said, my biggest concern was the time that it took to complete the coursework.
Thank you. And it sounds like, setting that time aside has been helpful with that. Mary, I think you're the next question asker.
This question is for Rhonda Lee and Amy Wedden. We're going to start with Rhonda. Rhonda, what is something you learned from letters that you did not already know?
Well, the most impactful thing that I learned from letters that I did not know is that speech sounds of a given language, number one, are different from language to language, and that they are embedded in the child's phonological processor within the first year of life. And what that means is that when we're getting these children that speak a different language or speak a different dialect, that there are some sounds that we say in our everyday speaking that they may not be able to speak. They may not be able to hear those sounds. They may not be able to produce those sounds. That then we as teachers have to be aware of it and then systematically work to directly teach those children to hear those sounds, to make those sounds by looking at how we say it, how we hear it, giving them lots and lots of experience. And so some of those children who grow up in their homes not speaking English are going to need a lot of support and assistance, and not just children who speak different languages, but children who don't hear standard American English in their homes. And I have to tell you, as a true Southern girl, there are some sounds that I have to work at making in standard English sounds so they can hear them not only as I say them, as we say them, but as they are experienced in the world so that they'll be able to hear and recognize those sounds.
Absolutely. And Rhonda, you're teaching kindergarten, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Yes.
yeah, so that phoneme articulation and working on that sound production with kids, you are spot on with that. Thank you so much for bringing that, lifting that up. That's such a fantastic point. All right, Amy, what is something you learned from letters that you did not already know?
Okay, so I've learned a lot. So this question was kind of hard to narrow down. So I'm going to highlight 3 of those. So my learning has come to in the area of phonological and phonemic awareness. I can now see how important this piece is in kindergarten and first grade, which I don't feel like we've ever touched on before. The progression of speech sound awareness is really the foundation to learning to read and to spell, and how important that is. Another piece that I've learned is the importance of automaticity that is needed in memory and recall. We need to have those isolated sounds at a very automatic level. So this has kind of helped me understand why M class has those 1-minute diagnostic assessments. We must have those sub skills that are at the automatic level, so then that we can devote our higher order skills such as problem solving. All the processing systems, so the 4-part model that's highlighted in the letters, all of those areas should be activated in the delivery of lessons. So I feel like that has really helped me kind of look at lessons and what we teach so that we can be sure all 4 of those are highlighted. But it's kind of really given me the background knowledge of why we are doing some of these things. And so letters is really giving the teachers answers to a lot of the questions that we just did them because we did it, but we really didn't know the why we are doing them. So it's really helped us to implement these things into our instruction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And when we understand the why, the what we do becomes so much better. Thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy for the next question.
So
Kathy?
inspiring, so inspiring. And thank you so much for your response. And this question is for 2 of our very knowledgeable instructional coaches, Lindsay from Union and Rebecca from Columbus. Describe the bookwork and the online modules and how complex is the content. So if we could start with Lindsay and then we'll go over to Rebecca in Columbus. Lindsay?
So I always start with the bookwork first. I find it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to read each session. I'll kind of highlight as I read, and then I'll complete the online portion and jot notes as I go through it. The online portion is typically about 45 minutes to an hour, and it's pretty interactive. So there are videos and quizzes. And what I love about it is that it's broken down so you can work through it in chunks. If you don't have the time to sit through and do the entire online session, it'll break it down and it'll save your place. A lot of material that's covered in the book, or a lot of it is in the book, but the online sessions really help highlight the key points and they add additional information that you may not see in the book. As far as the complexity, I don't think the book itself is too complex, but the very first several sessions really revolve around the science of reading and how the brain works. So to be honest, I was pretty nervous about that as we first started because it was so technical. But once you learn the science behind everything and how the brain works and how students learn to read, that really helps provide that foundation for the rest of the content. And after those technical sessions, the book really starts going into practical application. It talks about reading difficulties and interventions and assessments and just a bunch of other literacy components that you can take straight to the classroom. And now that we're really in the meat of the content, it's just exciting to see teachers come to PLCs. They're excited about what they're learning. They're having great discussions about how they're applying everything that they have learned in their classrooms. So I'd say that all in all, with the book and the online session, total time spent is typically anywhere from an hour to 2 hours maybe to complete those components. And our county did create a pacing guide, which has been extremely helpful to stay on pace and not get too far behind. Our goal is typically to complete about a session a week, and I think that's been very manageable.
Well, that sounds fabulous, Leslie. Thank you so much. And Rebecca, what about Columbus County? Tell us about you.
So I will say that I agree with Lindsay and what she was saying. I choose to do my book reading ahead of time as well before I do the online module. It's really up to the teacher, their preference with that. But the book does accompany the online work. The modules do have guidelines of how long they're going to take, so it's easy for teachers to kind of plan around and look at how much time each module is going to take, and then they can, decide how long they want to spend or if they've got enough time. The modules can be paused and resumed and watched again if they need to. So that's really helpful as well. So if you get interrupted and you feel like that you didn't quite get the module, you can always go back and rewatch the module. So that's great. As far as the complexity goes, I think it really depends on the prior knowledge of the teacher that's going through the course. Some things can be more complex. I do agree again that the first couple of modules seem to be more complex just because they're dealing with the brain, and most teachers do not have that prior knowledge. So that part does seem to be a little bit more complex. I would encourage teachers to find a place where they can concentrate. This is not the type of module work or book reading that you can just go through and be multitasking. You really need to have a focus when you're working on this so that you can absorb everything that the modules have.
Thank you. Thank you so much for just sharing your response and just being totally honest about, just bringing what you're bringing to the table. And so I totally appreciate everything that you've said. And Angela, I'm going to turn that over to you now.
All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit, and the next few questions are going to be more about application. So talk to us about your coaching process or model. And Renee, I'm going to start with you. What does the coaching process look like at your school?
All right, so I'm in a fortunate position that I am a literacy coach for our district as well as instructional coach at the school that I work at. And because of this unique position and because of this opportunity, I get to help build a lot of the PLC conversations that our district has, as we are a small district. We have 6 elementary schools. And we've taken some of the resources that DPI has actually provided for the entire state of North Carolina and tailored those down to the needs for our teachers in our buildings. And during those PLC conversations is where all the real work comes out. We find that the common discussions really lead themselves to intentional conversations about concepts. We clarify any misconceptions, instructional strategies. And from there, as a coach, I can start to build my own coaching cycles around misconceptions or possible pieces where folks need extra support. So having the opportunity to be a coach during this time has been just wonderful because I can take the time to learn for myself. I can then support my staff and then, build their capacity for years to come, even after my position is no longer available.
Thank you, Renee. And that's so great to hear about taking, any misconceptions that are happening and really being able to address those with the teachers to help the learning. So Casey, I'd love to know from you, how is coaching go in your school?
So ours is very similar, like Renee's as well. Our district opted for the instructional coaches to take part in the letter courses alongside of the teachers. At the beginning stages of the planning, we had discussions about whether the coaches should be part of the admin part or the teacher part. So we opted to do the teacher part with the teachers. That has, of course, been more work, but it has been so beneficial because we've been in the trenches with them. We're able to collaborate with them, and lots of good conversations are stemming around the bridge to practice piece. So we're able to collaborate and share strategies similar to the PLC framework, and just having those conversations about, what's working with your case studies, what's not working. Here's what I tried, and just sharing those ideas and strategies. As coaches, we frequent PLCs a lot in our schools, and so we are really encouraging the principals to, as facilitators of PLCs, to have conversations stemming around the strategies that they're learning in LETRS. And so that has been, like Renee mentioned, the most impactful place that I've really been able to get in there and dig down into LETRS and seeing the misconceptions and what the teachers are using and what's working. So just being there alongside of our teachers doing the same as them has been extremely helpful. We've also been able to visit classrooms and model several of the strategies and co-teach with the teachers and implement those strategies. And we've had lots of opportunities to create the documents, like the pacing and different things for our district as well. So we've been able to give lots of feedback on that, which has been helpful when it's time to push out those documents to our teachers.
Thank you, Casey. It sounds like you have a very full, well-rounded support for your teachers through the work that you're doing and also what your principals are doing and the practice and the modeling. Excellent. Let's see, Mary, over to you.
Angela, and I just will put in a shameless plug here for the PLC that that DPI Office of Early Learning has worked on for the K-5 letters. That's a great resource for instructional coaches and principals to utilize as you support your teachers while you're going through this. And we can add that link so that participants can get their hands on that too, because it has lots of great resources in it that you can pull and use as needed. You don't have to necessarily do the PLC exactly how it's written. You can do it. You can pull out the pieces and the resources that you need in your school. So that is complete up through Unit 3. Unit 4 is in the works and will be published very, very soon. So I just want to put out a shameless plug for that. That is a great resource for you guys to use. I've seen a couple of questions in the Q&A about recording and also about a pacing guide. Yes, we are recording this, and also in terms of a pacing guide, your district will most likely give you some support with that. But within that PLC that the Office of Early Learning has created, there's a sample. So there's an example, so you can kind of just get an idea for what it might look like. So sometimes that helps because it's oftentimes the unknown that scares us, right? So at least looking at a sample pacing, you could have that from the PLC. So here is the next question. This is for Rebecca Ham, a instructional coach, and for Leanne Davis from the teacher perspective. So 2 perspectives here. Let's start with Rebecca. How is the knowledge that you are gaining in letters enhancing your understanding of your core curriculum?
So in Columbus County, we use HMH into reading as our core reading curriculum, and we also have adopted a supplemental phonics program, which is Reading Horizons. And basically, I think that's been said a little bit earlier, but Letters has really given us the why behind all of that that's in both of those programs. So we just have a much deeper understanding now of why it is so important to build that phonological awareness with our students, and then what activities really do that. So it's really provided a why for our teachers. In our core program, we have a building foundation section that we often found teachers would skip due to time. And now teachers are coming around and we're having these discussions in PLC about the importance of going in and making sure that we're doing all of those phonological awareness activities so that we can build that foundation, because that's really what it takes to build a reader. So the why has been really important. It's also helped us evaluate our assessments within the program. We were putting value on certain assessments, and that has started to shift, especially in the K2 realm, and what we're looking at and what we really need to be assessing and making sure that our students are showing mastery in before they move on so that they can be solid readers.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Leanne?
I teach 4th grade, and by the time students get to 4th grade, a lot of times we clump reading issues as being comprehension problems. And going through letters, I understand better now that when students can't comprehend, that may be part of the issue, but it may go back to the phonological and phonemic issues. We have seen that at our school over the last 2 years with the circumstances, with COVID, and the kids not being in school on a regular basis as before, that our particular students needed some extra phonological support. We were scheduled this year to start with Morpheme Magic with our 4th graders. And as we looked into that a little bit further, we were like, they're not quite ready. So because of letters and because of knowing that 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 portion is just as necessary, we backed up and we started doing Letterland with our fourth graders this year. And as an intervention, we've been using the Sunday program with for more intense needs. Something that really changed, I think, my perspective on the whole reading difficulties in students is doing the face-to-face activity that we had with the Greek letters, and we had to try to read a passage using those. And I was just astounded at how frustrated I got. And there was absolutely no way to comprehend because I didn't know what the Greek letters were. So that was very eye-opening for me, and it was a good activity to do to just show how our struggling readers feel when they come across text that's too difficult.
Thank you so much, Leanne, and I really appreciate your perspective as a fourth grade teacher. So thank you so much for offering that to us. All right, I believe that is back over to you, Angela.
All right. So I know I've heard many questions about the Bridge to Practice activities. So I'd love to hear about how Bridge to Practice activities are applicable to your lessons or students. And I'd like to start this with Tyler.
Well, with the Bridge to Practice activities, there are several different types of activities. Some of those activities require that you reflect on kind of your past teaching experiences, while other activities have you sit down and complete activities with your students. These activities have helped me kind of identify some of the weaknesses that some of my struggling readers are having. And they've allowed me to dive a little deeper into some of the assessments and things that I have been using in the classroom, such as MClass. And it's helped me to kind of go a little bit further to kind of see where my students' weaknesses are at. In addition to that, I will say that I have just finished up with Unit 2, and Unit 2 had a Bridge to Practice activity that involved using the PAST assessment, which is basically a phonological awareness screening test. And after doing this assessment with my case study students, I actually decided to go a step further and do this assessment with some of my other students in the class. And I have found that some of my students that I made the assumption were fluent readers actually still have some deficits with some phonological awareness skills. So I will say that the Bridge to Practice has been eye-opening for me.
Thank you, Tyler. Rhonda, how about you? Can you tell me how the Bridge to Practice activities are applicable to your lessons or students?
One of the things that I like about the Bridge to Practice activities is that it gives you a chance to apply information that you're getting right now and activities, and you get to do it on a small scale before you're being asked to do it on a large scale. So many times when we adopt a new program or a new way of thinking, you are handed something that you're not familiar with and ask you to do it on a whole grade level, and you don't have the knowledge that you need to be successful with it. This way you get a chance to work with it in a small pool before you go out into the ocean, and you get a chance to work out your kinks and get your questions about it answered and think. So it gives you a chance to ask questions about how to apply the lessons in a whole class setting. And once you have more information about something, you're more likely to use it more consistently and instead of quitting. And one of the other things I like about it is that it gives you a chance to ask questions, because we all know that we go someplace and you're presented with something new and you're asked, do you have any questions? And if you don't have enough information about something, you don't have the great questions to ask about it. So being able to do these Bridge to Practice helps me, help us as we are applying this to understand what our questions are and what we need to ask before we dive into this whole class, whole school, whole district.
Thank you, Rhonda. Absolutely. Using the Bridge to Practice as a way to identify what your questions are is a really smart way to think about those practices. And then, to Tyler's point on being able to then apply what we're doing through the bridge to practice with the other students in the classroom is another really good way to kind of see how all the pieces come together. So thank you both very much. I am turning this over to Kathy.
Yes, and it's so inspirational. I am so inspired today. So thank you so much. And this question goes out to two of our incredible teachers, Antoinette, a kindergarten teacher from Columbus, and Megan, a second grade teacher from Union. And here's the question. Given the requirements regarding the online modules, the required readings, and the bridge to practice application work that we just heard about, how do you manage the letters requirement within your weekly schedule? How do you manage all that? So, Antoinette, we'll start with you and then Megan.
Okay, in the classroom, as far as the bridge to application practice work, I'm finding that it mirrors our Reading Horizons phonics program, the supplement program that was mentioned earlier. So I use those strategies in my intervention groups with my case study students. I use it during whole group, doing some guided reading groups, and it just depends on the level and the skill that my case study students need. When it comes to the online modules and the reading, I do that a lot at home in my own time, with the exception of the stuff that needs to be done for the case study students in the classroom. And after looking at my schedule, I try to choose one, maybe sometimes 2 days a week that I can really sit down and devote to working on letters. And our district also has teacher work days incorporated into certain months that we get to work on letters on those days.
Thank you so much, Antoinette. And Megan, would you like to respond as well?
Yes. So I think just with anything new that you do, you always kind of try some things and see what works best for you. I know one way that I'm able to work on the requirements of letters is that my principal gives us built-in time throughout the week to spend and dedicate to letters. I typically work on my bridge to practice during this time because some of the activities do require you to use your case study student to complete them. And also just because I personally have found that I'm sure you guys can relate that whenever you are working in the building, it's really hard to go uninterrupted. And I feel like with letters, for me, I am better at understanding the content when I put full focus on it. And so I personally like to get through a whole session at one time. And so one way that I have been able to do this is by usually on the weekends, I will treat myself to a good Starbucks coffee and I will make it a treat for me and I will just spend some time in my letters. And I do agree that it typically does take about an hour to 2 hours per session. And I like to do the reading with the online modules side by side because they do go hand in hand. And I've also found that as I progress through letters that I find the content is more something that I'm interested in. So I also kind of look forward to it now because the learning to me is something that I can definitely use in my own classroom.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for investing in this learning. And both of you are just doing exactly that. And so I have a follow-up question, and this is for Megan, a wonderful teacher from Davie County, and Amy, our inspirational instructional coach from Union. And here's the question. Tell us how your school is integrating letters content into your PLCs, your professional development sessions, and or other school processes. So if we could just go ahead and start with Megan from Davie.
So in our district, we have incorporated using letters discussions once a month during our PLCs, and that is strictly for discussing our bridge to practice content. We meet with one of our instructional coaches. We discuss what the bridge to practice session included. So we break it apart. It's been broken into, our first session was Unit 1, and then we had lessons 1 through 4. And then our next one we will be doing next month is going to be Unit 1 sessions 5 through 8. And so they break it apart, and then that way we can make sure we have all the components we need and everything to upload into our folders. We also have focused on the discussion piece within our PLCs because it kind of bleeds into our other PLCs, not just that one time a month. We are putting up a reading wall in our PLC room, including the Scarborough's rope and the 4-part processing model, so that we can utilize that in our discussions when we look at data and making sure that we are helping our students where they need it the most.
Thank you so much for saying that, just and for sharing that information. And Amy, would you please share as well from a coach's perspective?
Okay, so our school is integrating our new letters learning into our weekly PLCs. So our PLC room, just like Megan said, has kind of become like the place to hang some anchor things there. So we have the reading rope bulletin board. We have some things from Unit 1 and Unit 2. So the simple view equation, the processing model. We've got the hourglass figure in there. But something that we have begun to do is after each unit, I support the PLCs with kind of a brief overview and some of those important takeaways that maybe need to be looked at in the units. We have marked our manuals with some stickies so that we can have those tabs to refer back to. And we also have kind of made a list of some common understandings that we need to have for that unit. But just like Megan, who's at my school, we also take a time to kind of celebrate because it is a lot of heavy work. So after each unit, we kind of have ourselves as a little treat and we just enjoy a little bit of celebration time. Some school processes that we have done is we've integrated some decodable text in our kindergarten through 2nd grade classrooms. We continue to spend time just kind of adjusting and shifting based upon our progress monitoring, our assessment data, but also just our learning that we're doing as we go through letters. We've had many aha moments where we can really see our teachers kind of making those connections to their teaching, but also their students learning. I just had a teacher, text me today, hey, after you left, this student referred to this kind of letter and he was able to sound it out. So, I mean, daily we are seeing some of these things. Someone mentioned too, just the past assessment, the core phonics survey, spelling inventory. We're really using those assessment pieces to really drive our instruction and be sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. So it's really given us a common language across the building K-5, which kind of supports our alignment and helping our students where their reading skills are maybe not on grade level or the standards and how complex. I mean, it's really giving us answers to how complex reading truly is.
I want to come and visit your professional learning communities with Megan and Amy. So thank you so much for sharing and leading the way with what true professional learning communities and PLCs look like. So I'll share it and pass it over to my colleague, Angela. Thank you so much.
All right, so I will be honest and say this was probably the question I was most excited to hear about from teachers and coaches, and just really wanted to know, how have your classroom instruction and literacy support or your PLCs changed based on what you're learning in letters? I think wanting to know the reason that this is happening, what's changing for our students. So I'd love to start this off with Tyler. If you don't mind sharing how your classroom instruction, literacy support, or PLCs have changed based on what you're learning in letters.
Well, I'm a 3rd grade teacher, and I've been teaching 3rd grade. This is my 11th year. So in the past, my classroom instruction has pretty much always been focused on comprehension mixed with some fluency. And I have been focused on the end-of-year assessments we have with the 3rd grade read and EOG. Reflecting on my teaching after having gone through some of the letters program, I will say that I feel like I could have done a whole lot more to help my struggling readers. And so this year, going through the program, I have started spending a whole lot more time working with the phonics program that we have, the Reading Horizons. I've been working with students with using decodable readers. I've gone and pulled the 2nd grade set of decodable readers to kind of help with my struggling readers. I have spent more time breaking apart words and using decoding strategies, and I am no longer using phrases such as just break the word apart or find a part that you know. I'm able to actually help students find rules to break words apart and follow phonetic skills. In addition to those changes in my classroom instruction, I have noticed changes in our PLCs as well. PLCs, we have always been a data-driven school where we are looking at data and trying to find ways to improve our scores. But instead of just looking at data and talking about it being a comprehension piece, we've actually taken our assessments with Amplify and MClass, and we're able to go and dig a little bit deeper and find exactly what decoding strategies students are messing up on. We've had conversations as a staff about how confusing the English language actually is and how difficult some of the rules and patterns are. And it's just nice to see that some of our conversation has turned to, what types of errors is this student making, or what phonetic skills could this student use some extra support in?
Thank you so much, Tyler, for sharing that. All those great pieces just warm my heart. But I think thinking about the outcome for this is that our kids are going to be reading. That is the goal. That is why we're doing this, and it's so great to hear not just what you're doing, but what you're no longer saying too. The things that you're moving away from, and really supporting those foundational reading skills, and teaching the students and talking about what those errors are and how we can better support them with the specific phonics instruction that will help them to read. So thank you so much for sharing that. I would love to hear a coach perspective on this for this question as well. We talk about not just instruction, but the support that's happening. So Lindsay, would you be willing to share how the classroom instruction has changed, how literacy support and PLCs have changed based on what you're learning in LETRS?
Yes. So as an instructional support specialist, I go into PLCs to help support and coach teachers, as well as go into individual classrooms to offer support. Recently, I did become aware that DPI put out those materials for coaching sessions with LETRS, like Mary mentioned earlier. So moving forward, that's definitely going to be a part of our PLCs. And I definitely recommend other coaches who might be listening check those out as well. They've been great, what I've seen so far. But my district colleagues and I, we collaborate a lot on LETRS for PLCs. We share content in a shared Google Drive, which has been extremely helpful. We support each other by throwing in session and unit reviews and celebrations that we've created, bulletin board ideas, just take and go resources to help support teachers. In my specific building, I'd say one of the biggest shifts that we've seen in PLCs is just how much more meaningful our conversations are now about literacy. So we've spent so many years focusing on balanced literacy. So really the shift to structured literacy and going from guided reading and using leveled readers to now decodables, that's just been a really big conversation this year. In classrooms, I'm seeing multisensory activities, phoneme grapheme mapping, and assessments and screeners with purpose now. In the past, sometimes I think those assessments or screeners were kind of completed just to check a box and say that they were done. But now through LETRS, we're really able to dig deep into that data and use it to better inform our instruction. We also started a literacy task force in my building. We have representatives at each grade level. And we really use what we've learned in LETRS to help review and tweak kind of how we're teaching literacy now, what's working, what's not, and what resources we're using. We do use Flyleaf at my school right now, and it's been awesome just hearing our teachers make the connections with what they see and learn from LETRS. It's just awesome validation when they're running in with their LETRS book and saying, oh my gosh, this lesson plan is matching what I'm doing now. So it's been great. LETRS and the science of reading are truly guiding our planning and our literacy conversations in PLCs.
Thank you, Lindsay. What a great way to kind of just showcase how all the different pieces that you're using are really connected to the science of reading through looking at the different assessments, but also not just that we're doing it, but we're doing it for a meaning to be able to help support the kids and to teach them to read, and all the support you're doing. So we really appreciate all that work that you're putting into it. All right, so we're going to turn this last question over to Mary.
All right, so this is a great question. We're going to turn to one of our coaches and one of our teachers for some advice. So this is for Renee from Davie and for Antoinette, Antoinette from Columbus. So first we'll start with Renee, and this is a coach's perspective. Renee is a coach in Davie County. What suggestions do you have for teachers in cohort 2 and cohort 3 as they plan for letters?
So I am so excited to have this question because I want to start it with a little bit of a spelling lesson. I'm going to say GRACE, and that just spells grace. And then PACE, which is pace. And those two things together are going to get you where you need to go. Giving yourself grace and giving yourselves the time to really digest what you're learning and to really put it into practice and to pace yourself and not let it overwhelm you is going to be something that's really going to make the biggest difference in how this content is received. I've had the pure pleasure of being able to be on a part of a team, is our ELA content team, to help build a pacing guide for our teachers, to work with our DPI consultant, to actually go through letters myself, both the administrative side and the teacher side. So I've come at it from all facets, which is a very unique opportunity, but at the same time, it's really given me the reality of what everybody else is getting ready to jump into. So I highly suggest you give yourselves grace, because there are some things in here that if you've ever been an upper grades teacher and you're ready to jump into unit 1, you may say, oh my goodness, I have no idea what they're talking about. But then you just hold on, because when you get to volume 2, it's all about vocabulary. It's all about comprehension, which usually seems true to our upper grades teachers' ears, and it kind of makes our lower grades teachers a little bit concerned. So do know there's a little bit for everybody, and there's always room to grow. All right. I would say really working together as a team, whether that be your grade level team, that's your PLC team, with the support in your building. Ask questions. It's okay not to know, because we wouldn't be doing this if we knew it all, and we're never going to know it all because we're teachers and we're lifelong learners. As a coach, for those of us that are on here that are coaches, take feedback from your teachers. Let them know that they're heard. The reality is they carry so many things on their plates every single day. And I think we all do in education, to be quite honest. But I think taking the feedback and thinking to ourselves, what can we control in this situation? I can control that I'm going to give myself 2 hours this week to do my letters work. I cannot control how much the state's going to ask me to complete, but what can I control? And I think if you can reframe your thoughts there, you will have a different outlook on what you're doing. And I think you will receive the information better. Connect it to the instruction you already do. And I think I've heard some of that already in some of my other colleagues today. Look at the instruction, look at the programs that you use, look at the instructional practices that you use, and know that, you know, it feels good and exciting whenever things are just clicking, and it's okay to make changes. And that's what we're here for. That's what we're here to support with. Have clear communication. I've learned that being clear in what you're expected to do, being clear in what you may not know to do, and ask the question, because otherwise there's nothing more frustrating than to be at the end of something and then you not have done it correctly. And that makes it hard. So be clear in your communication. Be prepared for your face-to-face days, although they're on a screen. And this is not a real background, obviously, but if you were behind me, there's stuff everywhere. You wouldn't want to clean your desk off during that time, as much as you probably want to. Be prepared. Leanne got to talk earlier about an activity we did on our face-to-face day and how much it really changed her as a 4th grade teacher. You don't know what kinds of nuggets of great things that are in these face-to-face days if you aren't actively participating. Your bridge to practice, make it applicable and find value in it if you possibly can. I heard earlier, I believe one of my colleagues said, you know, I love that she said, you know, a drop in the ocean, if you will. If you try something before you jump all in, because at that point, then you know it works and you're willing to put the effort and the time in. And then I've already kind of plugged this in, but reach out to your DPI consultant. We have the pleasure to work with Mary Durfel, who's on our call today. But each of you in this webinar has someone that can support you. So find that person and get on their emails train and talk with them, and they are there for you. Look at their documentation. I think Mary's listed that in our information over here on the right, our Q&A. Use those documents because they are meant to support you and to make it all make sense.
Thank you so much, Renee, for all of those great little nuggets of advice for cohort 2 and cohort 3. And now we are going to let Miss Antoinette talk to us about what suggestions she has for teachers as they plan for letters.
Definitely talk to your peers and your instructional coaches if you have a question or to balance back and forth ideas. If your district gives you a pacing guide, follow it, because it is a lot of information and it can become overwhelming. I can't stress that enough. Follow that pacing guide. in your downtime, I know teachers don't get a lot of that, but in your downtime, like at home, if you've already done your session for the week, maybe even try to stay ahead and do another session so that you don't fall behind, because it can get overwhelming too if you do fall behind. And I know I keep saying don't fall behind, but don't rush through it just to get it done, because it is a requirement. Really take time to absorb what you're learning, because some of all of the information is beneficial and it does work. And if you have time, have a time that you really devote to letters, like your time that you set aside to specifically do it without interruptions.
I love that, Antoinette. As I've gone through letters, that has been my experience as well. Just staying on pace, because you can absorb the content so much better if you are going through it at a slower pace and you don't have to cram it all in. And I love what you said about it being so applicable. I go back to my letters manual all the time. That's the great thing about having that manual, is you'll be able to go back to it again and again and again. It's such a treasure to have as a teacher. Thank you so much for those suggestions, ladies. And I am going to turn it over to Kathy.
Well, I am honored to be living letters with all of these wonderful colleagues across the state of North Carolina. Thank you so much. And I've learned so much from each of you today, and I've been so inspired. And you've just been an outstanding panelist today, and we're grateful that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to join us, as well as everyone that is joining us on this call today and on this webinar. And so we just want to make sure that you check your email for the link to the notes and the recordings from today's session. The video will be available no later than Friday, March the 4th, and linked on this post-webinar flyer, which is being added to the chat at this time. So more Science of Reading resources are available on the Office of Early Learning website. And here it is on the screen. To get to the OEL website, use the bit.ly in all caps, OELNCDPI. And from there, check on early literacy, click on the early literacy, then the science of reading, scroll to the bottom for the resources, and all the webinars are in the table under modules and webinars. By next Friday, you will find the links to today's panel and this outstanding discussion with all of these wonderful educators across the state of North Carolina. Again, we thank you for your time. We thank all the panelists today for inspiring us to go live letters and to do what's right with reading instruction. And I'm just crying, and I don't know why. But we thank you all for joining us. We hope that you have a great rest of your day and week. And thank you for being here. And thank you, panelists. Thank you.